C-SPAN asked if we try that again, all right? If everybody wants to be on. Ready? 3, 2, 1.
The motorcade is now making its way here to Vinoy Park. We're moments away from introducing the president.
But first, ladies and gentlemen, you know them, you love them. They're America's favorite new band, String Fever. Folks, one more time for the Bogus Yankee Band. These kids have been great today.
We're now going to introduce the president's special guests this afternoon. We start with the Reverend Russell Odom.
All right.
Mr. Jack Eckerd. The governor's campaign chairman, Jeb Bush. Congressman Bill Young. The governor's running mate for Lieutenant Governor Allison DeFore. Mrs. Terry DeFore. Congressman Andy Ireland. William Bennett, Director of the National Office of Capital. Tim Smith, Florida Secretary of State. And Mr. Van Poole, Chairman of the Republican Party of Florida.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, accompanied by Governor and Municipal
to be out here today, and we recognize that there's a gentleman down the coast here called Marco who's trying to work its way north. And I appreciate very much the fact that you're here, not only to support my re-election as the first Republican to be re-elected in the history of the state of Florida, also support those who are running for Congress, the Cabinet, House, and Senate, to be sure that Florida truly becomes the Republican state that we want it to be. To further this cause, we have the #1 Republican in the United States with us today. But more important, he is the great president of the United States of America. A man that I have gotten to know since 1983, for he was in the Oval Office when I made my trip in 1983 to discuss with him and former President Ronald Reagan on my becoming a Republican in the state of Florida. And ever since then, we have shared interests in Florida and the United States, and have worked on mutual goals, whether it be keeping offshore drilling away from the state of Florida, or making certain that whenever there is any concern that impacts any facet in Florida, that he in fact has an open ear to our concern. And what more can you ask than that? And certainly a president who stands up for this country like he's been doing in the Middle East. A president that I'm sure he would like to have the same opportunity that I have as governor of the state of Florida, which is to veto bad expenditures, which he's not able to do. And a man that works as president of the United States, as a father, as a grandfather, as an American, as a Republican leader, to be sure that this nation's economy moves forward, and that in fact he can get Congress to adopt a responsible budget. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me thank you for all that you're doing in my re-election campaign, and we're 4 weeks away from that great moment. 4 weeks to making certain that the war against crime and drugs and protecting our environment and having responsible growth management, responsible transportation programs, reform of education, and yes, reform in the ethics of those who serve in government and limiting the terms of those who live in government. So let's give a good Florida, a good Pinellas County, a good St. Petersburg, a good Tampa Bay welcome to the President of the United States.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you very, very much. I'll get to that in a minute. Listen, Governor Martinez and to Mary Jane, thank you both for greeting us, and thank all of you for that welcome. I want to pay my respects to all of you and thank you for being here. And I guarantee to get out of here before Marco gets in here, or whatever the name of that hurricane is, and I'm taking off my coat because it feels like it's coming. My respects to Sheriff Allison DeFore, the next Lieutenant Governor of this state. We need him. And in as much as this area of Florida has been right out in the forefront of the fight against drugs, I want to single out a member of my top echelon in government, the man that is leading the fight nationally against drugs, our drug czar, Bill Bennett. What a job he's doing. Congressman Ireland and Congressman Young, thank you for your support and being with us today, and I'm particularly glad, whoops, he's not here. I was going to welcome another Floridian from this area who flew down with us on Air Force One, Mel Sembler, our Florida guy who's now our ambassador in Australia, but forget him, he didn't make it. And of course, an old friend of mine, Van Poole, our chairman, our state chairman. Great to see you, Van, and thanks what you're doing to get out the vote on Election Day. I want to single out the governor's able, terrific, fantastic campaign chairman. That's my boy, our son, Jeb, over here. And I want to put in a plug for John McKay and Don Sullivan. And next month, let's elect them to the state Senate and help Florida claim the first Republican legislative body in the entire South. Lastly, but first in importance, I do want to say what a privilege it is to be back here on behalf of my friend of long standing, your great Governor Bob Martinez. His first term has been magnificent. magnificent, and now we're going to ensure a second term that's even better. Better for the people of Florida. This visitor rose from a phone call. Jeb told the governor, he said, we got a surprise for St. Petersburg, which will really excite people. Bob says, you mean big league baseball's finally coming to St. Pete? I'm not taking any sides in that fight. I know Tampa wants a team, Miami, Orlando. They're all in the expansion running, and they're running to win. That's the whole purpose of my being here. I want to be standing next to a guy who is also running to win and will win, Bob Martinez. Most of you know the background, but let me give it to you once again. Grandson of Spanish immigrants, son of a waiter, worked his way through school, became a teacher, then a businessman, then mayor of Tampa. And Bob Dole calls him Florida's distinguished and dynamic governor. Ronald Reagan calls him the embodiment of the American dream. And for my part, I just plan to call him governor for the next 4 years. You know why? Let me tell you why.
4 more years! 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 4 more years!
Okay, you guys are committed. That's good. So am I. Right. Let me explain why I support him. First, he's a man of ingenuity. Who else but Bob would buy a little possum, Wausau's annual possum festival, and then name it his campaign mascot? You see, he knows the difference between possums and liberal Democrats. Possums only pretend to be asleep. The Bob Martinez that I know also has conviction. He's not been a follower who gets lost in the current. He's a profile in character who alters the tide. And we need a leader with that kind of courage in Tallahassee in the 1990s. He has not been afraid to make the tough decisions. And that is the kind of governor we need. Strong on traditional values, keeping things in perspective. It's like Bob tells me, it's fine that you're here, but if you really want to wow the crowd, bring Barbara. Well, she's doing pretty well, isn't she? Best wishes, too, for the most charismatic figure in our family, the noted author Millie, our dog. Seriously, our dog wrote a book that was bestseller in the New York Times bestseller list a week ago. And you can see why this is the third trip then that I've made to Florida for Bob. We probably spent more time on the road together than Hope and Crosby. But I'm back again because folks always respect him, even when they disagree with him. And so I think the way to sum it up is that he is taking a strong stand for a better tomorrow. Look first, just a couple of the issues. Look first at the environment. Every time I fish along the flats off Isla Mirada, I'm reminded how special Florida is. And we want to protect those natural resources. And so Governor Martinez created the East Everglades Land Acquisition Task Force. And because Florida set aside part of this land, I was able to sign a bill increasing the size of the Everglades National Park by more than 100,000 acres. And I hear the alligators are so pleased. Alligators are so pleased they're wearing polo shirts with a picture of Bob Martinez on their chest up there. But also I'm very pleased and grateful for his support for our rewriting of the Clean Air Act. The problem is that for 14 months, the United States Congress has refused to act. And here's the solution. On November 6th, elect Bob Martinez, who then will help convince the Congress to pass a clean air bill that I can sign. And another area that unites us, and certainly one that Bill Bennett understands, I'm talking about crime and drugs. And Bob knows that drugs threaten every single community in the United States. And so he set a precedent by appointing a state drug czar And he also has another conviction that goes with the law enforcement side. He believes that cop killers ought to get what they deserve, and so do I. And that's what we're trying to do in changing the federal law. So he stepped into the federal criminal code, doubling the prison space to enforce it, backs our administration's Crime Control Act to enact a workable death penalty, a real penalty for those who kill our federal law enforcement officers. And last week, after 16 months of delay, the House of Representatives up there finally passed its version of the Crime Act, and now it goes to the Senate House Committee, Conference Committee, and so please help me. Join with me in sending them a message to draft a tough bill that takes the shackles off of the policemen, the courts, and the law of this land. This past summer, Bob has taken his message to all 67 of Florida's counties. You get to know a state that way, understand its heartbeat, its priorities, get to learn what the voters want. Policies which empower people, not the bureaucrats. And perhaps the best example of this is a comprehensive budget agreement to cut the federal budget deficit by $500 billion over the next 5 years. And I want the Congress to send me a plan which spurs growth, opportunity, and prosperity. Growth, opportunity, and prosperity. GOP. That is a nice thing. Let me tell you what needs to be done now in the next 10 days to get a final agreement on the federal deficit that is mortgaging the future of these kids here. And let me be candid. There's no doubt that with Republicans in control of Capitol Hill, good ones like the two that are sitting with me here today, there would be a different story to tell. Something to keep in mind on November 6th. But the fact that Democrats control the Congress is all the more reason for Republicans to stand firm for the best budget deal possible. You know, pressures caused by the deficit have been building for years. And this year they reached the boiling point. For 8 long months we've wrestled with this problem. And for 8 long months I have tried to negotiate in good faith with the liberals in the Congress. And I believe the American people didn't send me as president to play cheap politics. They sent me up there to govern. And so I put it all on the table, even the revenue side, even taxes, and I took plenty of political heat and then pushed hard for a bipartisan budget agreement. Not because it was the best plan ever, but because it was the best plan possible. And now I will continue to press hard for a budget that proves to the American people that we can and that we will, in real terms, bring this ghastly federal budget deficit to its knees. Say to the members of Congress that might be listening, here's things it's got to achieve. It must be consistent with that bipartisan budget agreement on a bipartisan basis it was produced. It must include pro-growth incentives to stimulate the economy. It must deliver real savings through real spending cuts, cuts with teeth, cuts that are enforceable. And any budget I sign must include the significant budget process reforms hammered out in that bipartisan agreement. There is no point going into an agreement and then having the same congressional dance take place year in and year out and getting nothing done. The test comes 9 days from now, and Congress's budget must still be passed by both houses no later than October 19th. And let me make clear to Congress just how serious I am about this deadline. Last Friday night, with no budget agreement, I vetoed that thing they call it the continuing resolution. And that keeps the government if they signed that and I had signed it, that would have just kept the operating of the government just day in and day out the same old way. Well, I vetoed that. The veto was sustained, and I kept the pressure on. And to make the point, no more business as usual. Let's get the job done, members of Congress. come down here to assign blame, but you know, I've seen those surveys. The American people are pretty smart. They know where the action is, and they know that Congress has the responsibility to pass a budget, and it's about time that they met that responsibility. Parenthetically, I got a little heat for closing the Washington Monument, and I would apologize if there are any of those Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts here from Florida that went up there. But I know that if I hadn't taken that action, congressmen would have all headed home, marched out in front of the Columbus Day Parade all over the country, telling people what good they were doing instead of staying in Washington and solving the deficit problem. A sound budget deficit agreement will defend our vital interests at home, and all of us know that we must also defend our vital interests in our civilized values around the world. So in the Persian Gulf, we have and we will take a strong, unalterable stand against aggression, against the outrageous aggression of Saddam Hussein. I read a lot of the letters from parents and relatives of those who have family over there, and I can't tell them, I wish I could, how long it will take to reach our objectives, and I can't tell exactly what sacrifices will be demanded. But this we do know. American troops will not remain in the Persian Gulf a day longer than we are wanted or needed by our friends, but we will stay for as long as it takes to complete our mission. Keep up the pressure. We're going to keep the faith with our friends and allies and the UN and the American people. Faith, finally, with the finest soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines any nation could possibly have. A couple of Florida examples. Daniel Rich, an Air Force Tech Sergeant from Daytona Beach, and today he's standing shoulder to shoulder with colleagues like Army Lieutenant Colonel Robert Tippett of Tallahassee, or the Marines First Lieutenant Helen Pratt of Satellite Beach. And then there's Brenda Spriggs, and she wrote me from Fort Lauderdale to say how proud she is of her son, Jeff, currently serving out there in Saudi Arabia. Mrs. Spriggs, let me tell you, I share your pride, and to you I pledge, America will never, ever let our servicemen and women down. We will stand with them in every single way possible. You know, these kids show that America would not be the land of the free if it were not also the home of the brave. And Bob knows this, Bob Martinez. He knows that while our forces are defending us abroad, we must defend them here at home. And so on November 6th, let's take a strong stand for what America is and what America stands for, what we embody in the world. Let's get out the vote. Let's win the state Senate and the House of Representatives, and let's roll up our sleeves and re-elect this outstanding governor. Thank you for this occasion. God bless the United States of America, and let's keep Bob Martinez our great governor.
Good trip.